I never thought I would find myself in this situation, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. My name is Jake, and I guess you could say I was living what I thought was a pretty decent life. I had a stable job as a graphic designer, a cozy little house in the suburbs, and a wife named Emily who I believed was my partner in all things. We'd been married for 5 years, and for the most part things seemed good. Sure, we had our normal ups and downs, but who doesn't? But over the past few months, I started noticing some small changes in Emily. She began spending more time on her phone, frequently texting and giggling at something only she could see. I joke about it, saying she was probably planning a surprise party for me or something silly. I wanted to be the supportive husband. After all, who doesn't love surprises? However, deep down, those small changes began to gnaw at me. One night, I came home a little later than usual. I'd wrapped up a project that had kept me busy, pulling late hours. As I walked in, I noticed. Emily was in the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, but she quickly hid it in her lap when she saw me. That was unusual behavior coming from her, and it raised the alarm bells in my head. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just tired. I asked her how her day went, and she responded with the same rehearsed lines she had been using for weeks. Oh, just the usual work stuff. It was like she was reciting a script. The real turning point came when I decided to investigate further. The whole if you suspect something, just look into it kind of thing. I noticed she had left her computer on one day and curiosity got the better of me. I peeked at her messages and my heart sank. There it was, a conversation with a friend named Mark, who I soon found out was my wealthy uncle. The messages were flirty, filled with innuendos and plans to meet up when I was out of town. I felt sick to my stomach as I read through their exchanges. I confronted her that evening. I was shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. I threw her phone on the table and demanded to know what was going on. The look on her face was a mixture of shock and guilt, but she quickly composed herself. "Jake, it's not what it looks like," she exclaimed, her voice rising. She tried to come up with some excuse about how I was working too much and how Mark was just a friend who understood her better. But the more she spoke, the more enraged I became. She acted like it was no big deal, like she'd been sharing a few harmless laughs and I was the one overreacting. In that moment, I felt a rush of emotions. Betrayal, anger, confusion. It was overwhelming. I didn't know how to process it all. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me and I was left grasping at straws. On one hand, I wanted to scream and yell to make her feel the pain she had caused me. But on the other hand, I just wanted to curl up in a ball and disappear. How could she do this to me? How could she betray our vows so easily? The confrontation spiraled into an explosion of accusations and tears. Emily tried to downplay everything, insisting it was just a phase, a moment of weakness. It was infuriating to watch her twist the narrative, to see her so nonchalant about the man I'd trusted with my family. I felt like I was losing my mind. That night ended with her storming out of the room, leaving me to wrestle with the harsh reality that my marriage was crumbling right in front of me. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to give her another chance. We had shared so much together, built a life together, but how could I reconcile that with the image of her with my uncle? I couldn't shake off the feelings of humiliation and betrayal. I spent the night tossing and turning, grappling with the emotions swirling inside of me, and the more I thought, the more I realized I needed to do something, something that would help me regain control. The days following that explosive confrontation were a blur. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere, focusing on the betrayal that had shattered my sense of normalcy. I couldn't concentrate on my projects, the designs I was supposed to be creating felt pointless when my world was collapsing. I would catch myself staring blankly at my computer screen, remembering Emily's face as she tried to play the innocent victim. The anger simmered beneath the surface, and I knew I needed to channel it into something productive. I started piecing together a plan, one that was less about revenge and more about justice. I thought about my uncle, the man who had taken advantage of my trust in more ways than one. His financial dealings were always a little shady. I had heard whispers about tax evasion and fraud, but had brushed them off as family gossip. In that moment, I realized I could use what I knew to turn the tables on both him and Emily. If they wanted to play a game, I would make sure I played it to win. I began by doing my research. I dug through old emails, receipts, and any kind of documentation that could provide a breadcrumb trail of my uncle's questionable financial practices. I even reached out to a few old friends who worked in finance, asking casual questions about tax regulations and what could potentially be classified as fraud. It felt like I was putting together a puzzle, and each piece brought me a step closer to the picture I wanted to unveil. During this time, Emily continued to act as if nothing had happened. She tried to talk to me like we were still a couple, still friends, and I played along, giving her just enough to keep her off guard. I'd nod along as she talked about her day, but inside I was plotting. I could see the frustration building in her when I wouldn't engage with her the way I used to. I wouldn't let her distract me from my goal. As I gathered more evidence, I felt a sense of empowerment. I knew that my uncle was living large off the money he was scamming the government out of, and the thought of taking that away from him felt like poetic justice. I imagined him sitting in his lavish home, driving expensive cars, all while I could expose him and watch everything he had come crashing down. It was intoxicating. The day finally came when I had enough information, and I decided it was time to act. I'd gathered a trove of documents that showed discrepancies in his financial statements. The pieces of the puzzle fit together perfectly, expenses that didn't match up, income that seemed inflated, and transactions that had no clear explanation. I felt like a detective revealing a case. I had the evidence, and now it was time to present it. I reached out to the IRS anonymously, submitting everything I had, along with a tip-off about my uncle's questionable practices. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I hit send on the email. There was no going back now. I could already picture the look on my uncle's face when the IRS came knocking. It was a delightful mental image, one that fueled my motivation. But even as I reveled in my plan, I was aware of the emotional turmoil still raging within me. The rage and pain from Emily's betrayal were still fresh, and while I was excited about the revenge I was orchestrating, it didn't erase the sadness gnawing at my insides. I thought about all the moments we had shared, the laughter, the love, the plans for a future that now felt like a cruel joke. And then came the moment when my uncle's lavish lifestyle collided with the reality of his actions. I would be sitting on the sidelines, watching it unfold, while knowing that I had a part in this downfall. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation I felt when I discovered his affair with Emily. Meanwhile, Emily still tried to maintain normalcy at home. She would ask me about my day, and I would give her the same vague responses. I could see her growing more frustrated, sensing the shift in the dynamics of our relationship. I even caught her texting Mark a few times, and it infuriated me. It was as if she didn't understand the gravity of our situation. One night I came home from work, and Emily was waiting for me with a concerned look on her face. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaking slightly. I felt a thrill of anticipation at the idea of her potentially confessing, but I remained composed, ready to hear her out. She began to speak, her words spilling out with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I never meant for it to get this far, but Mark and we have a connection. You've been distant, and I thought I could find comfort elsewhere." Each word made my blood boil, but I kept my face neutral, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of seeing how much she affected me. "Emily," I said slowly, "you think this is about distance. It's about trust. You're cheating on me with my own uncle, and you want to rationalize it by blaming me. No, this is on you. You made your choice." Her expression shifted from defiance to disbelief. She looked genuinely shocked that I wasn't going to bend to her narrative. In that moment, I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer the submissive husband. I was taking control of my life. "Jake, I can fix this. Just give me a chance," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "Fix it by continuing to lie and cheat." I replied, my voice steady. "You've made your bed, Emily, and now it's time for you to lie in it." And with that, I walked away, leaving her standing there, stunned. Little did she know, the real storm was just beginning. My plan was in motion, and I was ready to watch it unfold. After that night, things at home became even more tense. Emily tried to play the martyr, feigning remorse for her actions but not truly grasping the depth of her betrayal. I could see her attempts to rekindle our relationship, but they felt forced and insincere. It was like watching a bad actor on stage, desperately trying to remember their lines. I was no longer invested in that performance. Each morning, I would wake up to see her sleeping next to me, and it struck me as surreal. How could I share my life with someone who had been so disloyal? I'd glance at her while she slept, feeling a mixture of pity and anger. I went through the motions of making breakfast, but even the smell of coffee couldn't mask the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. Days turned into weeks, and as I awaited the fallout from my tip to the IRS, I became acutely aware of Emily's growing anxiety. She would pace around the house, biting her nails or scrolling through her phone, likely hoping for a message from Mark. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was waiting for someone who had put our marriage on the line when she had it all along. Her focus shifted more toward her phone than our conversations, which only fueled my resolve to keep moving forward with my plan. I had started distancing myself emotionally, but not without a pang of sadness. I missed the woman I had fallen in love with, the one who laughed at my jokes and shared dreams of adventure. Yet, that woman felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the reality of who she had become. I would hear her talk about mundane things, trying to draw me into conversation, and I would respond with just enough to keep things civil. I was a ghost in my own home, silently executing my revenge while she tried to piece together a facade of normalcy. The day the IRS finally showed up at my uncle's door was a day I'd been anticipating for a while. I had received an anonymous tip that they were investigating, and I couldn't help but feel a thrill of satisfaction. I watched from my car across the street as the agents knocked on his door, armed with the evidence I had provided. The look on his face when he realized what was happening was priceless. But as with any drama, things didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. My uncle, ever the slippery character, managed to evade some of the primary charges due to a lack of concrete evidence for certain transactions. It was infuriating to see him escape lightly when he should have been held accountable for the years of deceit. I could see him through the window, arguing with the agents, waving his arms and looking as though he was trying to charm his way out of trouble. The thought of him slipping through the cracks made my blood boil. After the agents left, I saw him take out his phone, likely to call Emily. It struck me like a lightning bolt. I had been so focused on his downfall that I hadn't considered how this would affect her. Would she go running back to him? I felt a surge of jealousy as I imagined her attempting to comfort him, to soothe the wounds of his bruised ego. That night, I confronted Emily again. I had to know if she planned to turn back to my uncle now that he was in a vulnerable position. I wanted to catch her off guard, to pin her in a way that would reveal her true intentions. "Did you talk to Mark today?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter as I watched her prepare dinner. She froze for a moment, her back to me, and I could see her shoulders tense. "Why would I talk to him? He's got his own problems now," she replied, feigning nonchalance. "Problems?" I pressed. "You think he'll just fall off the face of the earth because he's being investigated? You're still in contact, aren't you?" "Jake, I don't need this right now," she huffed, turning around to face me, her eyes flashing with anger. "I'm trying to focus on us and make things better." "Better?" I scoffed. "You mean running back to him when it suits you? Is that what you're hoping for?" Her expression shifted from anger to a mix of defensiveness and guilt. "I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right." "Right," I said, my voice rising. "By continuing to lie and pretend you didn't betray me. How can I trust anything you say?" For a moment we stood there, the air thick with tension. I could see the realization dawning on her that I might not be the fool she thought I was. Her mask was slipping and I relished in the moment. "Just admit it, Emily," I continued, leaning closer. "The moment things get tough, you'll crawl back to him. You're not in this for us, you're in this for yourself." Her silence said it all. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and walked away, leaving her standing there, clenching her fists in frustration. I had exposed her in a way she didn't expect, and in that moment I felt a flicker of power. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control, and it felt liberating. But the satisfaction was short-lived. The emotional weight of our deteriorating relationship began to crush me again. I had set the wheels in motion for revenge, yet I still felt hollow inside. I was executing my plan meticulously, but part of me wondered if I was losing myself in the process. Would this revenge bring me peace, or would it only leave me more broken? I had to remind myself of the bigger picture. This was just about retaliation. It was about ensuring that both Emily and my uncle faced the consequences of their actions, and I was willing to go the distance, no matter how much it hurt. With each passing day, I found myself slipping further into a mindset of vengeance, and each moment felt like a countdown to the inevitable fallout that awaited them both. As the weeks dragged on, the tension in the house reached a boiling point. Emily continued to oscillate between trying to win me back and avoiding the reality of her situation. She tried to plan romantic dinners, but they felt forced and hollow. I'd sit across from her, picking at my food while she chattered on about trivial things, desperately trying to connect with the man she had betrayed. Each time she smiled at me, it felt like a mask slipping off to reveal the true monster beneath. Meanwhile, I was still anxiously waiting for any news on my uncle's legal troubles. I had heard through the family grapevine that things were not going well for him. The IRS had launched a full investigation, and he was panicking. I relished the thought of him sweating bullets, knowing that I had a hand in this unfolding drama. Each piece of gossip that trickled down to me fed my appetite for revenge, and I found myself eagerly anticipating the moment when his empire would crumble. One night, as I was sitting in the living room scrolling through my phone, I received a text from an unknown number. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting it to be an update on the investigation, or perhaps more concerning, a message from Emily's friend. Instead, it was a message from my uncle's lawyer, a man I had met only a few times at family gatherings. "Jake, we need to talk. It's about Mark." My stomach dropped. I glanced over at Emily, who was in the kitchen, oblivious to the turmoil that was about to unfold. I texted back, arranging a meeting for the next day. I had to know what was happening, and I knew that whatever it was, it would bring more chaos into our lives. The next morning, I met my uncle's lawyer at a local cafe. As soon as I sat down, he got straight to the point. "Jake, I wanted to discuss the potential fallout from the investigation," he said, his voice low and serious. "Your uncle is in a tight spot and he's looking for any way to mitigate damage. He's desperate." "Desperate, huh?" I replied, trying to suppress the satisfaction that bubbled inside me. "What does that mean?" "It means he's willing to make deals." But he hesitated, and I could see the weight of his words hanging in the air. "He's also willing to pull you into this mess if he thinks it'll protect himself." My heart raced as I processed his words. My uncle, in his desperation, might throw me under the bus. I had given the IRS enough information to sink him, and now he was looking for a way to shift the blame. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Because I know you're not like him. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I also know about your wife," he replied, leaning in closer. "She's been in communication with him. I can't say much more, but I think you need to be cautious. Your uncle is willing to play dirty." The weight of his words settled heavily in my chest. Emily was still in contact with him. My mind raced at the implications. I had tried to believe that she wouldn't go back to Mark, yet here I was, staring at the reality that she was still entangled in this web of deceit. "Thanks for the heads up," I said, standing up to leave. "I appreciate it." I was already formulating a plan in my head. If my uncle thought he could drag me down with him, he was dead wrong. I would expose him at every turn, not just for my own sake, but for the sake of my dignity. When I got home, I confronted Emily again. I needed to know the extent of her involvement with my uncle. As soon as I walked in, I found her sitting on the couch, a nervous look in her eyes. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, my tone firm. She looked up at me, and for a brief moment I saw fear flicker on her face. "What about?" "About you and my uncle," I said, crossing my arms. "How long are you planning to keep this charade going?" "What are you talking about?" she replied, feigning ignorance. "Don't play dumb with me. I know you've been in contact with him, and I also know he's in trouble. His lawyer spoke to me today," I said, watching as her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. "Why would you be talking to his lawyer?" She shot back, defensive. Because it's my business now. You think you can just ignore the consequences of your actions. You're still involved with him and I won't stand for it. Jake, I told you I wanted to fix things, she insisted, but the desperation in her voice only fueled my anger. Fix things? By running back to him. You've shown me your true colors, Emily, and I can't trust you anymore. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. No more excuses. I need to know everything, what you've been discussing with him and how far this has gone. For a moment she hesitated, and I could see the gears in her mind turning. Finally she sighed, her shoulders sagging in defeat. It was a mistake, Jake. I never meant for it to go this far, but he knows things about us, about our life, and he used that to manipulate me. I was confused. Confused? You had a choice and you made the wrong one, I snapped. You think I could ever trust you again after this? I was scared. She shouted, tears welling in her eyes. He made me believe I could have a life without you, and I was weak. I thought I could find comfort in him when you were distant. Distant? I echoed, incredulous. You created that distance. You chose to be with him. I know, she cried, her voice breaking. But I want to make it right. I want us to work on this together. Together, I laughed bitterly. How can you even say that with a straight face? You've betrayed me in the worst way possible. I don't even recognize you anymore. In that moment, I felt a wave of resolve washing over me. I wouldn't be dragged back into her manipulative games. I had to take charge, not just for myself, but to ensure she understood the consequences of her actions. I had a plan, and it was time to execute it. I'm done, Emily. I can't keep doing this, I said, my voice steady. This isn't about reconciliation anymore, it's about accountability. You and Mark can keep your little games, but I'm moving on. I'm done being a pawn in your mess. With that, I turned away, leaving her in stunned silence. I felt a strange sense of liberation as I walked away from the chaos. I had made my decision. I would expose my uncle and I wouldn't look back. The game was on, and I was ready to play to win. The days following my confrontation with Emily were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. I had finally drawn a line in the sand, and while the weight of my choice felt heavy, it was also liberating. I was no longer stagnant, waiting for her to decide our fate. I was taking control, and the thrill of it was intoxicating. I dove deeper into my plan to ensure my uncle faced the consequences of his actions. I started gathering more evidence, meticulously documenting everything I could find related to his financial dealings. I spent late nights poring over records and piecing together the timeline of his fraud. The thrill of the hunt was almost addictive, and I relished the idea of him being brought down by the very system he had exploited for so long. Meanwhile, Emily was in a state of turmoil. I could see her trying to act normal, but the facade was cracking. The nights were filled with tension, and we often found ourselves in awkward silences. She would attempt to engage me in conversation, but I had shifted into a different mode, one of detachment and purpose. I was no longer interested in her excuses or her attempts to manipulate my emotions. I had resolved to keep my distance, which only seemed to frustrate her more. One night I was alone in my office, buried in paperwork, when I received a text from her. "Can we talk?" It read. I stared at the screen, torn between the urge to ignore her and the nagging sense that I needed to address this once and for all. Finally, I decided to respond. "I don't think there's anything left to say." "Come on, Jake. Just give me a chance to explain myself," she replied. I took a deep breath before typing back. "Explain what?" "How you betrayed me with my own uncle. How you thought you could find comfort in his arms. What is there to explain?" The silence that followed felt charged with unspoken words. I could imagine her frustration boiling over, but I was done being a punching bag for her guilt. I closed my phone and returned to the documents spread across my desk. Hours later, I was jolted from my focus by the sound of the front door slamming shut. I glanced at the clock. It was past midnight. Emily's footsteps echoed down the hallway, and I could hear her muttering to herself. I stood up, curiosity getting the better of me, and walked out to see what was happening. There she was, pacing the living room, her hair disheveled and her face flushed. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "Why can't you just talk to me like a normal person?" I crossed my arms, refusing to back down. "What do you want me to say, Emily?" "That everything's fine, because it's not. You shattered my trust and I refuse to pretend otherwise." She looked at me. tears brimming in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, Jake. I thought I could fix things, but I really messed up. I was scared of losing you. Scared. You chose to run to him instead of working things out with me. That's not fear, that's cowardice," I shot back, my voice steady. "I know," she sobbed, her shoulders trembling. I thought I could have both. I thought I could find a way to be happy without losing you." In that moment, something inside me shifted. I could see the pain on her face, the reality of her choices weighing heavily on her. But the empathy I felt was quickly overshadowed by the anger that had driven me to this point. "You think you can just apologize your way back into my life? It doesn't work like that, Emily. You need to understand there are consequences for your actions. I'm willing to face those consequences. Just give me a chance," she pleaded, stepping closer, her eyes searching mine for a glimmer of hope. I held my ground, shaking my head. "This isn't about giving chances anymore. You've made your bed and now you have to lie in it." Her face fell and I could see the realization sink in. I was serious this time. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with tears or guilt. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation into my uncle deepened. I received updates from the lawyer, who informed me that the IRS had uncovered significant discrepancies in his financial statements. My heart raced with excitement. He was facing serious legal repercussions, and I was the one who had set this in motion. But with each piece of news, I felt a strange sense of emptiness. It was exhilarating to know I had orchestrated this downfall, yet the joy was overshadowed by the reality of my crumbling relationship with Emily. I had sought revenge, but at what cost? The tension in the house reached a boiling point when we had a family gathering planned. Emily had invited her parents over for dinner, hoping to put on a brave face and show that we were just fine. But I knew better. I was still hurting, and it felt like a mask I could no longer wear. As her parents arrived, I could see Emily's forced smile as she greeted them at the door. I attempted to play the role of the loving husband, but it felt like acting in a play where I no longer cared about the script. The night unfolded with awkward conversations and forced laughter, but I could feel the tension in the air. After dinner, as we sat in the living room sipping wine, I could feel my anger bubbling beneath the surface. Emily's father made a joke that fell flat, and I couldn't help but snicker. It was a pathetic attempt to lighten the mood, and it hit a nerve. I felt the urge to let loose, to tell them the truth about what was really going on. "Jake, you okay?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Just peachy," I replied, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Her parents exchanged glances, clearly puzzled. "Everything all right, son?" her father asked, and I could sense the underlying tension in his voice. "Yeah, just dealing with some family matters," I replied, shooting a glance at Emily. She looked like she was about to burst, and I felt a twisted satisfaction in seeing her discomfort. The evening spiraled into chaos when Emily finally snapped. "You don't have to be such an ass, Jake," she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. "This is supposed to be a pleasant evening and you're ruining it." I laughed bitterly. "Pleasant? You think this is pleasant? You're sitting here pretending everything is fine when we both know it's not." Her parents looked taken aback, and I could see Emily struggling to hold back tears. "This isn't the time or place," she shot back, her voice shaking. "Maybe it's the perfect time," I yelled. "Maybe everyone should know the truth about how you've betrayed me, how you've been playing both sides." The room fell silent, and I could see the realization dawning on her parents' faces. I had crossed a line, but I didn't care anymore. I was done hiding, done pretending that everything was okay. Emily burst into tears, her father reaching out to comfort her. "Jake, this isn't the way to handle this," he said, his voice firm but concerned. "No, maybe this is the way it needs to be handled," I shot back, feeling a mixture of anger and relief. "I'm done being the nice guy. I'm done being the one who gets walked all over." With that, I stormed out of the room, leaving the chaos behind me. I stepped outside, breathing in the cool night air, my heart racing. I had exposed the raw truth, and while it felt liberating, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just ignited a fire that was going to burn everything in its path. As I stood there, staring up at the stars, I realized that I was on the brink of something monumental. The lines had been drawn, and while I may have been filled with anger, I was also beginning to understand what I truly wanted. It was time to decide what the future held for me, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The aftermath of that explosive evening left the air thick with tension and uncertainty. I could hear muffled voices coming from inside the house, and I knew Emily was likely trying to explain herself to her parents, who were probably reeling from the revelation of her betrayal. But at that moment I didn't care. I needed space to think, to process everything that had just happened. As I stood outside, I felt a storm of emotions brewing inside me: anger, sadness, confusion, but also a sense of clarity. I had spent so much time focusing on revenge and the idea of bringing my uncle to justice that I had neglected my own needs. I wasn't just a pawn in this game. I was a player, and it was time to decide how I wanted to move forward. Eventually, I heard the door creak open, and Emily stepped outside, her eyes puffy and red from crying. For a moment we locked eyes, and I could see the hurt and desperation in her expression. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't want to. I didn't want to hear her excuses or her attempts to rationalize her actions. But I also knew that we had reached a breaking point. If we were going to find any semblance of closure, we needed to confront this head-on. "Fine," I said, my tone flat. "Let's talk." We walked to the edge of the yard, away from the prying eyes of her parents. The air was heavy with unspoken words, and I could feel the tension crackling between us. "I'm sorry," she started, her voice small. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't think about how my actions would affect you or our marriage. I was just lost." "Lost?" I echoed, incredulous. "You thought running to my uncle would solve your problems. You thought cheating on me would make you happy." "I was trying to find comfort," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought I could make things work with both of you, that I wouldn't have to choose. I was afraid of losing you, Jake. I didn't realize how deeply I'd hurt you until it was too late." Her words hit me like a wave, and I felt the anger inside me simmer. "You thought you could have it all," I replied, shaking my head. "You were willing to sacrifice everything we built for a fleeting moment of comfort. That's not love, Emily. That's selfishness." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And I hate myself for it. But I want to try to make things right. I want to fight for us, for our marriage. Please, just give me a chance to prove I can change." I stared at her, searching for that glimmer of sincerity, but doubt clouded my judgment. "You say you want to change, but do you really understand what that means? It's not just about saying the right things, it's about taking responsibility for your actions." "I will," she replied, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'll cut him out of my life completely. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I can't lose you, Jake." I took a step back, my heart racing. The thought of her with my uncle still burned in the back of my mind, and the pain was too fresh. "You need to understand, Emily, that trust isn't something that can be repaired overnight. It takes time, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to look at you the same way." "I understand that," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm willing to fight for us. I'll go to counseling, I'll do whatever it takes. Please just don't walk away from our marriage." Her plea struck a chord within me. I could see she was genuinely upset, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the love we once shared. But the betrayal hung in the air like a dark cloud, suffocating any hope I had left. "Emily, I need time," I said finally, my voice steady but firm. "I can't just jump back into things like nothing happened. I want to believe that you're sincere, but I need to see real change over time." "Okay," she whispered, her shoulders sagging in resignation. "I'll give you space. I hope I can show you how much you mean to me." With that, we walked back to the house in silence, the weight of the conversation heavy on my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew I needed to prioritize my own healing. I couldn't ignore the fact that I had lost a part of myself in this mess, and I needed to rediscover who I was outside of this marriage. As the days turned into weeks, I found solace in spending time with friends and diving into my work. I focused on my designs, channeling my emotions into my art. I started going to the gym again, pushing my body in ways that felt empowering. Slowly but surely, I began to reclaim pieces of myself I had lost during the chaos. Meanwhile, Emily honored my request for space. She took the initiative to go to therapy and began to show signs of real effort to change. She would text me updates about her sessions, about the things she was learning, about accountability, about reflection, and about what it meant to truly love someone. It was a small step, but I appreciated the effort she was putting in. As for my uncle, the investigation into his finances continued, and it became increasingly clear that he was facing serious legal repercussions. Watching him unravel from a distance was a bittersweet victory. I had achieved what I set out to do, yet the joy was muted. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something precious in the process. My trust in people, my faith in love, and the sense of security I once felt in my marriage. Months passed, and I still didn't have all the answers. Emily and I started having more open conversations, discussing our feelings, fears, and hopes. It was difficult, and there were moments when anger and resentment resurfaced, but I also began to see the woman I had fallen in love with years ago. One evening, after a long day, I found myself sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. Emily joined me, and for the first time in a while, we both sat in comfortable silence. The weight of our past still lingered in the air, but there was also a sense of hope. "Jake, I know I've messed up," she said finally, breaking the silence. "But I'm committed to proving to you that I can be better. I want to rebuild our trust step by step." I looked at her and saw the sincerity in her eyes. "I appreciate that," I replied, "but it won't be easy. Trust is something that has to be earned, and we both have a long way to go." "I understand," she nodded, her expression earnest. "I'm willing to put in the work. I want us to be stronger than before." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the sky, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. It was a small flame, but it was there nonetheless. Perhaps redemption was possible, not just for her, but for both of us. In the end, I realized that life was about choices and the consequences that follow. I had chosen to stand up for myself, to reclaim my power, and to seek the truth, even when it hurt. And now, as I looked toward the future, I could only hope that the journey ahead would lead us to a place of healing and renewed love. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other again, wiser, stronger, and more prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Life was unpredictable, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, I was ready to walk it, one step at a time.